It's go time.
Welcome to Quick Kicks here on Third Down Gamble with your host, Don Charbin, and special guest, Tim Kroeker, referee in the Canadian Football League.
Welcome to Quick Kicks, everyone, on Third Down Gamble. Don Charbin, and today a very special guest, a referee with the Canadian Football League. It's Tim Kroeker. Tim, great to have you on the podcast. I'm so excited to finally talk to an official that actually does games.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So you're a Saskatoon kid. You grew up in that city. Talk to me about growing up. What was it like for you?
My parents, my dad, I know especially, was not able to play sports. For whatever reason, his parents didn't believe in it. And I know that my mom's family was pretty heavily sports oriented. So we had the opportunities to play whatever we wanted to. So tried a bunch of different things growing up, had a rink in the backyard, even though I think everybody did back then. We all had rinks and played hockey, loved hockey. I think that's my favorite sport, still is. Grew up playing baseball, tried things like soccer, whatever. And then into high school, played hockey, and then into a lot of baseball. Started playing baseball when I was 10, probably t-ball when I was younger, and then played high school basketball and football and then baseball, and continued on playing college baseball. Went down to the States, and that was kind of my competitive playing career. After coming back there, I played with Team Canada for 3 summers, and then I started teaching.
Talk to me about going to the States and playing baseball. What was that experience like, and how old were you when that all started?
So yeah, it was my dream in high school to play college baseball. That was my dream in the States. And when I was 17, I still hadn't turned 18 yet. In the summer of 1988, I was in the kitchen of my buddy Scott Peterson's place, and he was talking to a coach. He had played junior college baseball in Iowa, and there was a coach that was moving to a 4-year school, and he was recruiting him. And then he kind of looked at me and said, "I got the third baseman, left-handed hitting third baseman. He's right in my kitchen." And the coach is like, "Oh, really? Oh, okay." And that's how I kind of started to get me down there. And I think they probably talked to some scouts, and I had an opportunity to go to St. Andrew's Presbyterian College in Laurinburg, North Carolina, small town, North Carolina, my first year. And so that was super exciting. I got to go with 5 other kids from Saskatchewan, actually. And so I had some buddies that were with me and played there for a year. It was a small NAIA school, NAIA Division One. Just didn't work out for me socially. I was actually telling my students this the other day, that I had to figure out how to relate to people, and I didn't do a very good job. I didn't make a lot of friends. I had a good year baseball, but I just didn't feel comfortable and just wasn't connected. So I came home for a year, and I thought I'll just go home and go to school and whatever and get my degree. And I met some guys playing summer baseball in Hazelett. Hazelett had a Sask Major Baseball League team, and some guys from California. And I think I might have went out once all weekend. I said, "You should come down and play junior college ball with us." So I did. And at that time, junior colleges in California didn't have scholarships. And so I just had to pay out-of-state tuition fees or whatever. And it was, I think it was $300 American a class. And then I did work study, and I just tried to whatever survive, lived with a couple buddies in an apartment, and then played in there at American River College in Sacramento for a year. That was my 2 years of eligibility. And then I had to move on to 4-year school, and then got an opportunity to play at Centenary College in Shreveport, Louisiana for my last 2 years. Smallest Division One school in the nation in Shreveport. Kind of most famous for Hal Sutton and Robert Parrish. If you recall, you're kind of that old that you can remember Robert Parrish from the Celtics. And it was awesome. It was great. It was great to meet people I got to play all over the U.S. and just meet a bunch of different people, and still to this day keep up with a lot of them and old roommates, and got to see a bunch of different places and play in a bunch of different places. And then after in 93, got invited to play with Team Canada. Played with Team Canada for 93, 94, 95 in the summers, and trained out of Windsor, and got to play in South America, all over the US and Florida, and in a little bit in Europe. So that was another awesome experience, traveling around, playing against the best players in the world. And at the time, Cuba had most of their players still at home. A lot of them hadn't left. So they had what was known as the best amateur team in the world. So we got to play against them and play with some guys that went on in the major leagues and play against them, and did that for 3 years, 3 summers, which was a great experience. It was wonderful.
That Canadian team, was it a U21, a U23, or was that just anybody?
It was just immense. It was the senior national team. Back then, it was made up of just college kids that were going to college or had just finished college, or it was. It's not to what it is now, because now they have pros. Before they didn't have pros. Before this was no pros at all. So it was only amateurs, and so there's no age group. It's just like men's.
Expectation of you obviously was to be there all the time, but were you getting compensated? Would you get just per diems, or how did that side of the equation work?
Nothing. Like, we got put up in the University of Windsor, and we ate like cafeteria food, or got lunch bags sent to us. We didn't make anything. It was for the summer, and then we'd go back to college. Like, I was done, but I had a lot of teammates that were still going to school. We would play in the world qualifying championships, the world championships, and might do a tournament here or there. And then we hosted the Americas Challenge. That was the qualifier for the U96 Atlanta Games. And we lost out to Nicaragua, and they ended up going to the Olympics, and we lost them. And it was pretty heartbreaking, because we had our best chance to go to the Olympics, because at the time they qualified by region, and Cuba was a shoo-in, and the US was hosting. So there was room for one more from the Americas, which it was either us or Puerto Rico or Mexico, or I think Brazil actually was there trying to qualify. But we lost Nicaragua that year.
Wow.
Yeah, it was fun. It was amazing. Like, got to play with Eric Gagne, who became like one of the best closers in baseball. He was an 18-year-old, just like firecracker. Like, he was just not scared of anybody at the time. And played with Jeff Zimmerman from Calgary, who was an undrafted free agent, and he actually faxed all 30 teams at the time. The only one who responded was Texas. And they said, come on down, drive yourself down at spring training, which he did. And then he ended up being an all-star with Texas. And it was a great story and a great guy. And just a great experience overall. Like, it was, what sports done for me has been unbelievable. That was even before football fishing.
Yeah, that's quite the story already.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, what was it like for being separated from your family for so much of that time? I know the Carolina experience didn't work out so well, but I mean, California, you're jumping to Shreveport. It's all over the States.
And that's at the time before cell phone. My parents would call me. I'd call them collect at 6 p.m. on Sunday and to talk to them. And so it was much different. As my friends would write me letters. Like, my friends would big into the outdoors, so my buddies would like make a VHS tape of fishing shows and send them to me, or like in the mail. So you went to the mail room, like the students union building or whatever, and you go check the mail like 3 times a day. So it was different that way, and it was very busy with baseball and school. There wasn't a lot of time to do many different things, but when we did, we had some time. And I remember living in North Carolina, we drove to Charlotte we got to go watch Jordan play the Hornets. We got to go watch Larry Bird play. We went to NC State Duke. We went to an NC State Duke game, college basketball game. We'd go to minor league games in Sumter, South Carolina, or Charleston, and go to all these minor league parks. And kind of the way, I don't know if you've seen Bull Durham, the movie, but it was kind of that vibe, which was really a really cool thing for a college baseball player to go see pros play. And they played with wood bats, and it was kind of a dream, basically.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome.
I'll bet. I can't imagine doing that myself.
Mm-hmm.
But then that comes to an end.
Yes.
Where do you step forward from there? I
got lucky. I just had coffee with an old colleague of mine that actually was in the interview process of when I got hired to be a teacher. Team Canada at the time in 95, we were barnstorming across Canada in a bus, playing at every major city and playing like the senior baseball all-stars of that city. And I had gotten to Winnipeg, and my parents called me and they said, "Hey, you got a call or a letter?" I can't remember if it was a call, maybe a letter from the school boards Greater Saskatoon Catholic Schools at the time, and you got a chance for an interview. I said, oh, okay, well, like where? And I said, well, St. Anne's School. I said, well, okay. So I ended up flying home from Winnipeg to Saskatoon while our team played in Winnipeg and had an interview for a teaching position. And then right after that, I drove down with my girlfriend at the time, who's been my wife for 26 years, kind of caught up with them in Moose Jaw. And then I got the job as a teacher. So I started teaching in the fall of 95. And my first principal was Al Mitchell, and he was a local official here in Saskatoon. He was an old baseball player himself. And he looked at me and said, hey, we need football refs. And he was a local official and said, we need refs. Would you like to come ref football, stay involved in sport? And I said, yeah, I never wanted to umpire baseball. Never wanted to do that. I had officiated basketball as a high school kid. And so I said, sure, yeah, I'll do that. Let's try that out. And that was in 96. I started the lowest level. I started doing 6-man football in Clavette and junior football, like wherever in the city were the junior teams. And that was the start of my football officiating career.
Cool.
Yeah. And then in 2005, I worked my way up. Pretty competitive guy. Like I've always wanted to work the best and did like whatever I could. Worked high school and then I worked PFC and made my way up to CIS at the time it was called. And the director of officiating from the CFL was coming around watching officials in non-CFL cities. They knew from CFL supervisors who the ones were in the CFL cities because they knew them personally. But he said, we're going to reach out to different places and see if we can find some more officials. And the supervisor at the time said, oh, George Black's coming to watch. He's going to watch. We put your name forward. And I said, well, who's George Black? I mean, I was so out of touch. I didn't know who that was or what he want. Like, well, okay, let's go officiate a game. And George watched me work and talked to me and said, we like the way you work. I said, okay, and gave me some pointers and different things. And then the next spring, he called me up and said, hey, how would you like to have a chance at officiating in the CFL? I think he was just waiting for me to like jump at the chance and say yes. I said, well, I think I'd be good. I got to talk this over with my wife. At the time, we had a 3-year-old, a 1-year-old, and we were trying for a third. And I said, can I get back to you? And he said, okay, yeah, sure, get back to me. And I talked over with my wife, and she said, yeah, give it a shot and see what happens. And that was in April of 2006. And here I am, 18, 19 years later.
Let's go through this. You are now tapped by George. You go down. What do you do? Do you work a preseason game? What kind of indoctrination? What kind of training?
I never had a chance to work on any pro rules. There's a lot of differences between the professional rules and the amateur rules. And in amateur football, I just totally turn it off for the whole off season and pick it up in August of the next year. So I it wasn't even on my radar. So I was sent the manual, the official's manual, was a big binder, and it was just kind of a crash course because what happened was one of the officials had to take a leave because his wife was ill. And so I wasn't even looked at as being like, I was kind of the extra guy thrown in. I wasn't being hired that year. Someone else took a year off. So I said, okay, who's the next person that we might want? So that was me. And so I got the binder stuff and it was overwhelming. I was working out on the treadmill and I was going through everything and it was really overwhelming. And I tried to do my best. And so you go to camp. And the time the camp is in Winnipeg and we have our physical testing, we have our meetings and we have our rules test. And we go through the standards that the league wants and the rule changes at camp. Very intense weekend of work. And at the time, I didn't know what shape I needed to be in. I remember getting there and it was kind of embarrassing. I remember being in the lobby and meeting a bunch of people. Hi, I'm Tim Kroeker. Hi, meeting all these guys that I'd seen on TV. And I remember meeting Ken Lazarick and Jake Ireland and Dave Ewell. And then I went upstairs and then I was shaking everybody's hand. And I was like, hey, hi, I'm Tim Kroeker. And he said, oh, yeah, Ken Lazarick. I just met you a few minutes ago. It kind of tells you how nervous I was. And so we did that as a camp. And I got told I'd share a crew for the summer and work 3 games for sure. I ended up working 4 games. Dave Hawkshaw and I shared the line judge position on a crew in the summer. typically in the CFL, we work with 6 crews in the summer and we cut down to 5 at Labor Day. And then we were sent back to amateur, which happens quite a bit with first year officials. And that was my first year.
So you share that position, you get sent back. For the CFL, is this an evaluation process or is this just getting experience right now?
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of both. They see how there's not only how you do on the field, and we get graded, every play is graded, but also how do you mesh with the crew? How are you as a teammate? How are you in the dressing room? How are you on the road? How are you in the meetings? And I kind of think if you're good in all those facets, then you can stick around. And if you're not, then you got to either get coached up, you get reminded. And some, I know with being in the league since 06, I've seen officials come and go. They do their 3 games and it's just not, they just don't have it, or do a couple, 3 years and maybe, or they stick around for 20, 15 or 20 or 10 or whatever it is. And I was lucky enough to stick around. I had a lot of good officials that, especially in the amateur ranks, that really were great mentors in Saskatoon. A lot of help. Al Mitchell, Al Waters, Barb Armstrong, Bob Klein, Randy Warwick. A lot of officials that helped me kind of along the way. And then especially in pros, then Brent Butchko is a great mentor. He's from Regina. Worked with him for a couple of years, and then you try to pick up on the different officials that are really even super solid or really good, and try to figure out what you can kind of take from them and learn from them.
That first year you come back, how long does it take before you finally stick, that you're actually doing games throughout, at least till the end of the regular season?
My second year, I did 10 games, and I did an extra few because Jeff Harbin broke his foot. So I was going to do 7, and then Jeff Harbin broke his foot, and I actually got to do games into September. That was awesome because he worked my first Labor Day Calgary that year. And I remember it was Ricky Ray, and it was, Edmonton, Calgary, and it's a big deal, and streakers on the field, and it was like a new experience for me. So that was fun. And then 08 is when I worked my first full year. And I worked with Murray Clark, who was a referee at the time, his crew in the summer. And then I was with Jake Ireland in the fall. Worked a full year. And at that time, our director was Tom Higgins, former coach. And his idea of assigning was the whole crew gets assigned to the Grey Cup. Typically, it had been the best at your position. That was his philosophy, was that the whole crew would work. And so I hadn't done a playoff game yet. And Jake calls me Saturday in November, and he says, "What are you doing on the 28th?" I said, "What?" I was kind of like, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I'm available." And so I actually worked my first playoff game in the Grey Cup in 08 in Montreal. At the time, it was awesome. I was up for it. I thought I was ready, as ready as I could be, and I was good. I didn't shy away from it. I embraced it and worked the game, and it went well. And I look back now, and if a rookie that hadn't done a game, and if I was like a 10-year vet, I would be like, why is he doing like that? Doesn't make sense. He hasn't done a playoff game yet. What happened was, after that season, kind of made a rule that in order to work a Grey Cup, you have to work at least 30 games, and you have to work at least a playoff game in a previous year. So a lot of the guys nicknamed it the Kroeker rule. So kind of had a role named after me.
Hi, this is Jamie Rydell from TSN, producer, and you're listening to the Third Down
66,000 people in the Big O. It was amazing. It was awesome. So great experience. Yeah.
Were you still back judging at that time? Were you?
I was a line judge at that time. I started out as a line judge, and kind of the way it worked, every official would come in as a line judge. They don't now. Now, if you were an umpire, if you're a downfield official, you come in as that. Rarely, never come in as straight as a referee. But yeah, I worked line judge for my first almost 8 years, and then did a little bit of field judge work, which I wasn't good at. And then they switched. They said, "Okay, you're not field judge." And then I asked to become a referee. I asked if they ever thought of me as a candidate for it. I would like to do it. And so I remember asking Tom Higgins at the time to do that, and said, okay, we'll think about it. And I got an opportunity in 2013, did my first referee game, and started then. I did it I think I did one game the year after, and then started out by doing a few games in 15. I never got to referee at the local level because the referees were all old guys. They were all like the senior guys. So I might have done maybe not even a handful of games at senior high school. So I never refed a game in U Sport. Never did maybe five games in high school. So I had to make all my mistakes on TSN and in front of 500,000 people on TV and in front of 30,000 people. And it was, I sucked. It was hard. It was difficult. And I had to really, in 2016, I remember I got sat down in October, which I'd been used to doing Grey Cups. I did a Grey Cup in 08, I did a Grey Cup in 12, I did a Grey Cup in 14, and had become a referee. And then all of a sudden it's October. It's like, nah, okay, you're done. And I remember sitting on the weekend, I went fishing because I wasn't working football. I said, well, okay, something's got to change. I got to figure things out here, or else I'm not going to be a referee. I had to figure it out and make changes and get better. And fortunately it did. Fortunately it worked out. Still here. So still here to talk about it.
What did you think you needed to change? Like, I know as a head official, you got to be in charge, but going from line judge to referee, what are the transitions you have to go through?
So you manage the game. Managing the game is knowing all the rules, which I did. But then early on in my career, I made a couple mistakes with applications, which can happen. But I think being trusted that you can handle the situations and appear under control and have things under control and be able to work a game within the time. TSN has a 3-hour window for us. It's important for us to not to have a long game. And for the teams and the fans and the players also, that you want to keep the game going for everybody. And that means that you're good with your decision making and good with your leadership. I think it's a trust thing that where you have control things and it's running smoothly. And it takes a while because I could watch officials work. I worked with Jake Ireland, I worked with Andre Prue, great referees that ran great games. But until you're right there in it, and especially when things go sideways, when things don't happen as they should, where you might have dual penalties or you have different things that are going on or whatever, being able to handle the situation smoothly, transition, make good decisions that maybe aren't rule book decisions, but I made this decision because of this to avoid this or whatever it is. And I think that's part of it too. And just game management, being a good leader for my crew, and to be comfortable with everything. It takes a few years. I remember when I first started, Bud Steen said it'll take you 2 to 3 years to really figure it out, and it did. And I thought, Bud, I got this. No, I didn't. I realized I didn't, and it takes a little while to become comfortable with running the game properly.
Hey, it's Dave Thomas, voice of your Saskatchewan Roughriders, and you're listening to the Third Down Gamble podcast.
And I guess question of comfortability, just being in your own skin out there, that all this noise is happening, all this action's happening, and I've got to be settled. I got to be good with this.
Oh yeah, for sure. We have to be the calming influence. We have to be the ones that talk to a player that's hot because of something happened, or a coach that might think of something is not right for them, or didn't get called right, or we missed something, and be able to handle those situations too. And then you're on TV and you're speaking to people and you're making sure that you're projecting properly and saying the right things and announcing penalties the right way. And we're asked to be perfect and get better every game. It's kind of how it works.
Yeah, not at all a problem.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Now, speaking of being on television and speaking to the television, do you get cues as to where to look when?
Yes, we do. I know that there's always the one camera right by the broadcaster, right in the middle, the red light's on. And then when you're in one side of the stadium or the other, sometimes the camera changes. Sometimes they'll use the one at the 30-yard line instead of the one at the 55. But we do get, for the challenges, there's our command center is counting us down. Okay, you're coming back. The call in the field stands. We're going to count you down 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, and then I flip on the mic and then go, because it's timed out like that.
It's timed with maybe a commercial that TSN's coming out of.
Yeah, commercial. Yep, totally.
I didn't realize.
Yeah, they went to commercials. When we have challenges, they go to commercial. They haven't used them all. They have 4 every quarter. If they haven't used them, that's when they go and they'll show different things and not have us standing around talking to the command center or them talking to us. So it's better to fill that time with either commercials, or they might be doing like a little cutaway to the broadcast crew talking about something else.
And it's been in your tenure that the command center has basically been developed and grown.
Yeah, it's my first year. So 06, it was the first year that they had replay. It was my first year. I'm doing a game in Calgary. It's raining. My first game, it's BC in Calgary. Wally Buono's behind me. I'm right on the sideline. Buono is working me. He is like, he knows I'm a rookie. And he is like, even in preseason, they don't care. But he knew I was a rookie. And so he was all over me about plays. Guys, I told him whatever. Might have been Joffrey Reynolds. He was playing. Then he comes, or somebody, running back comes around the side, goes down, gets tackled. Ball comes out. I whistle it down. Tweet. Ball's dead. So coach challenges it. And I remember my umpire at the time. We're kind of I never watched the big screen. I never want to. I just never do. And I'm standing there talking to him, and he's looking up at the big screen. He goes like, "Oh yeah, this is coming back." So that was my first game. I get turned over because I called the player down by contact, and the ball was out. So that was my first introduction to replay, and we embrace it. If we can get it right, if we don't get it right, if we can get it right with replay, that's fine. We never want to have it that way. Of course, I shouldn't have ruled the player down. I should have known it was out at the time. I think it's a good thing if we can get the play right, we move on, and then no one cares and no one talks about it because it was ruled correctly in the end. And it's evolved over time. They brought in challenging for pass interference, as the NFL did. They used to, and different ways the command center can rule on plays. Yeah, it's evolving all the time, and whatever rules committee decides on how things should be handled, we just have to make sure that we're on top of it and understand what can be reviewed, what cannot, what can be challenged, and work from there.
You mentioned it being your first, but did it take some time to be overruled? Did you have to let go of the ego a little bit and say, yeah, these things are going to happen? Yeah,
it's more so with I made a mistake and rather would not have it. If I made a mistake like that, like you should never rule a player down. You should do the ball in their possession when it's down. So that's something that is avoidable. You might have a play where you rule if there wasn't pass interference and it gets turned over that there was, and sometimes it's about angles. And as a referee, I remember a couple of years ago, I had a play where a quarterback ducked and they had a hand come across and it looked like it was just a glancing blow. And then when the command center looked at it in slow-mo, it looks like it's forcible. And so I remember whoever was in the command center said, yeah, we're going to put this one down. It's enough. It's enough forcible contact for roughing the passer. And sometimes it's like, that's okay. I mean, I didn't call it and I didn't feel it was forcible, but just the way it was ruled correctly after. So that can happen, and that's okay. That's as long as we get it right.
How important is communication among the crew that you have on the field?
It's really important. That's where usually things go sideways, is when we have that lack of communication. It's evolving. I think we're still evolving with how to effectively use it, because you can use it too much. I think the right type of communication is important, especially with the flow of the game. And we'll talk about pre-snap. There might be a player that's lined up in a certain spot that had checked in, and so the line of scrimmage official will say, okay, 65 is my end. And we know 65 is one of the two players that can play an eligible position if they report. And so that's important. And then reporting penalties and saying the right thing. You might have, my downfield official might have, I have have illegal contact against, so-and-so 25, but we had a catch and the gain is greater, so they'll decline. Okay, thank you. And that effective communication that I can get on the mic right away, make my signal, and then boom, we're going. And that saves a lot of time. And incomplete, complete, and depends on when the fans are super loud. You get in a playoff game when things are really loud, and it gets to be a little bit of a challenge to hear, even over our mics. We got to make sure that we're sometimes using nonverbal communication too, being able to check in with each other and understand what's going on.
You get to work with the same crew throughout the season. Is there any changes that go on?
In the summer, it's a little bit more of a challenge we have 6 crews, maybe a couple extras. And so there sometimes is working with not necessarily the same crew all the time, because it's very difficult to schedule all those extra officials in. And maybe sometimes in the summer, there's officials that are away for whatever reason. And then in the fall, we have at Labor Day we work the same crew. That's kind of the way it worked last year and the year before.
Going into playoffs and Grey Cup, is it a merit system again, or are you getting your crew still?
Yeah, it's the best. It's a merit system. So it's based on your performance. Those that have earned a playoff spot on the field work on the field, and they'll try if you're all from the same. Most are from the same crew. They'll try to keep as much as they can with the same crew.
Pre-game, when you guys get together and you're down in your room, what do you talk about? Do you talk about certain things that you need to watch for in the game? Do you say, hey guys, let's be sure of the rules today? Or
we have a pregame meeting every day before the game. If we have a game at 7, we'll meet in the morning after breakfast and before lunch. And the league will send us a video, probably 20 plays that we can learn from, that we can show that we got right, that we may have not done correctly. So it's kind of what's happening. There might be a trend that's happening among teams. So we've got to watch for this. We've seen this happening. So we'll have a pregame video. Then we'll also have a quiz that is put together by the league, that we go through rules and applications, and every crew gets that. And then the referee, my job is to also tailor my pregame I like involving the crew, have them lead discussions. It could be mechanics, and mechanics are the positioning and what to look for at different positions and different times. So we might talk about plays near the goal line, what can happen, what we have to really key on, and possible picks or possible rubs or possible whatever. And then we might have plays at the pylon that we go over, or like kick return. We might go over short kickoffs. There's a whole kind of list of different things you can go over, but we don't want to make the meeting too long, because I think you lose officials. So there's those things that we go over. That's before we even go to the stadium. Once we get to the stadium, we get dressed. 45 minutes before, we do a walk around. We check the field conditions, and then that's when the referee and umpire go talk to each coach, get their numbers of the captains, their punter, the kicker, their quarterbacks, their eligible players, and then they might have questions or comments, or they might have things that they have a question about or clarification. And then so we have that pregame meeting with them, and then come back, and then it's game time.
And then at halftime, it's break time, right, for you as well?
Yeah, 16 minutes. 16 minutes, we might talk about, okay, we had this play, and yeah, we got together and talked about, yeah, you saw this. Okay, yeah, I saw this. And so you kind of even at timeouts, we do talk about, hey, that play, that second down play when that guy crossed over here, did you have this guy and I had this guy? Okay, you want to make sure that we're watching the same thing, because so many things can happen in football. It's not cookie cutter plays, and the offense will try to do whatever they can to evade, get open. And we have a series of keys and responsibilities that we have. But when the parts are moving and they move past our zones, we have to transition. And it's those transition times we have to really make sure that we're tight on what we're watching. So we do talk a lot about that. We talk about plays all throughout the game.
It's almost akin when you're on the field that you're running a zone defense, because everybody's got their sphere of sort of influence.
Yep.
And then when players pass through, okay, I've got to hand off now.
Yep, totally. And kick plays that happen. So because it's mayhem. You have punts and you have kickoff. You have 24 players that are going everywhere. Initially on setup on offense and defense, we have certain officials responsible for like the number 1 receiver, which is the widest player on each side, the number 2 receiver or the line of scrimmage officials. And the field judge has possibly 2 receivers. So we only have 5 officials to look at 6 players and who's ever covering them. So that's when we have some overlap, and that's where we have some really getting in the zone and just understanding that we have to officiate the threat. So it doesn't necessarily, I'm not going to watch you if you're running in space without anyone 5 yards in front of you. So I'm not going to watch you. Like, why would I watch you? I'm going to watch who's being threatened over if it's close to my zone, because that's where we need to see possibly something happening. So that's part of the arty fishing, that it's part art, it's part science. You have to have a feel for things, and you have to be able to see the gray and not be very rigid with, I'm just looking here or here. That's a big part of it.
And when do you get to a game day? I guess in Regina, do you drive down or do you fly still?
It's a night. I'll drive down to Regina because it's easier, 2.5 hour drive, and we get there the night before. This year we had 2, almost 3 times when our flights were canceled that we had to travel on game day to different places. I don't know why. It hasn't happened in all my years, except this year, flight gets canceled. No way to get there. And he's even to Edmonton. So we're thinking, okay, should we rent a vehicle? So we just drive through the night so we get there the night before, typically, is just to avoid what could happen traveling game day, especially now, lots of cancellations. You don't want to have to rush there. And I've done it, had to do it twice where I had to have the meeting in the afternoon. I got there kind of late morning. It's just a little bit rushed, and we adjusted though and did okay. But yeah, it's always the night before.
Do you have an itinerary for the season? Do you know on opening weekend I'm here, then I'm there on the next weekend, or how does that work?
We usually get the summer schedule comes out till mid-August. That's what we get before the season. And then we'll get usually 4 weeks ahead of time after that. I'll kind of work it that way.
Get a month to organize yourself.
Yeah.
Now, do they take care of flight considerations, or is that your responsibility?
So it's nice that we get our game schedule, and then so we get a hold of our travel agent. I'll look online, see what flights work best for my work schedule and what works for me. And I will pick my flights and say, I'd like to take this flight. And we always try to fly the cheapest flight. We're not like the other league that they fly first class or fly business, and we have to be mindful of spending. And so whatever works best within your work schedule, then I can send those requests to my travel agent, and then she'll send me the e-ticket and kind of work from there. And then I'll just hop on the plane and take a cab or an Uber to the hotel. And yeah, Mr. Kroeker, we're waiting for you here, and welcome back. And that's it.
In terms of the whole scheduling thing, how does this impact your work life?
Well, as a teacher in the summer, I'm okay because I'm not teaching then. But then when we get Labor Day and past Labor Day, if we have a Friday night game, I'll have to take a Friday off. That's the way it is. I have to arrange my schedule and take that day off and have a substitute come in and prepare that way, and have to pay for that day. And then other officials that work all throughout the whole year, they might have to take holidays. They have to use their holidays. If they work a game on a Thursday, which we have Thursday games. We have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday games. If they're a Western official and have to work Thursday in Ottawa, which is hard to get to, you might have to, miss a little bit of work getting there, work the day, and then you might have to miss a little bit of work on the back end too, getting home. So it's a little bit of a challenge that way if you have a midweek game. So
Ottawa not being a hub city.
Yeah.
It's Montreal or Toronto you're going to be landing in.
Yeah. And depending where you live, we don't have a ton of flights in Saskatoon anymore, less now. And so, yeah, it's sometimes a challenge that way. But that's part of it. You wouldn't get into officiating if it didn't work with your work schedule. If it was too tough, then it wouldn't be a consideration.
And what about for the family? How does this impact them?
So you have to, I said this doesn't happen without my wife at all. She takes care of everything. She has been awesome. And if there's not support at home, everything suffers. Sometimes if I worked the game at Edmonton when the kids were young, sometimes it'd be, okay, we're going to make a weekend of it, work the game, we'll go to the water park or whatever. And kids are older now. That used to be part of a thing, but they now understand and kind of get it more. When they're kids, they're just like, oh, dad's doing football, whatever, he's on TV. But they understand a little bit more about what's involved now. and they've all been very supportive of it, which I'm very thankful for.
What has this career brought you the most? What do you feel the best about what you've been doing for the last almost 20 years?
Wow. I think being a part of a team, I grew up with team sports, and I really always appreciated working together toward a common goal. Working as a team and doing a job well done is pretty gratifying and part of sport. I just love sports. I always talk about how sports aren't scripted, and it's such a, I think it's a great thing. It's a great learning tool as a player, and now as an official, if I could be involved. And I started being involved as an amateur official, and the amateur officials, they do it not for them, because they don't make much, and it's a service. And I've been lucky enough now to do it as a part-time job, and something I really love doing still. It's a challenge to be on top of the rules all the time and stay in shape. All the different parts of it I still really like that way. I've said it before that as officials, we never win and we sometimes lose. And it's a different dynamic than being on a team where you win a championship or whatever. If you can spend whatever Saturday night or Friday night with some good friends, and you're working toward a common goal, and you get off the field and the papers and the internet or whatever are just not talking about you, that's awesome.
You're the folk that don't want to be the headline.
That's right. We never do. Never want to be in the papers. You never want to be the source of your boss getting called on the Monday morning call from the team. Yeah, and just I think we have a good purpose, and the officiating as a teacher, you really do it every day. Like you really, yeah, I've done it every day in like a teach phys ed or whatever. And then if you do any kind of games, you're reffing the game. I never thought I would ever be doing this. As a player, I never envisioned I want to be an official or whatever. But the more you're involved in sport, the more important they are. You understand the importance of what it is, and if without refs, it's just recess, as I've heard before. Someone say, "Yeah, I mean, the best part of it, I think it's a lot of things. Getting to know good people. I think probably the people, probably getting to know people. Probably the best part about it is the people that I've been involved with, the friends I've made, and the good times we've had. And that's what you remember. We remember the times when, we did Touchdown Pacific, and Murray had us over to his house. He had the whole crew over. You think about those times where people have invited you into their homes, and you've met their families, and you've been able to kind of spend those times outside of the lines. You remember more of that than that's probably the most important, I think, to people.
Off season, do you have a letdown after the season's over? When do the juices start flowing again?
Yeah, it used to be it depends how your season ends. If your season ends with you not getting the game that you wanted, you kind of chew on it for a while, and it can be if you're really wanting to get those games and do the Grey Cup, and you're not there and you can't get it, and the season's over, it becomes like a little void, because we're going near the end of the season. We're going almost every weekend, and then so we're going like 3 out of 4 weeks, and I worked 8 weeks in a row once at the end of the year, and then all of a sudden, then it's done. And so it's nice to be home for sure, but it's such a change from what you're used to doing that there's kind of a little bit of a hangover, but not so much now. I was pretty happy with the way things went this year. You put it away. When I first started, I didn't. I was, okay, I can't wait to get. And I remember Bill Hagan's one of my former colleagues. I'd be asking questions. I'd be emailing. He's like, "Get a life." He'd be like, "Get a." He'd just say, "Get a life." And so I'd be like, okay, maybe I have to just kind of chill out for a bit. In the new year, we'll start meeting. We do rules meetings with certain groups, and we have a group that has them probably into mid-February. So when we kind of start later February and talk once a week and send questions, and yeah, so we do that for February, March, April, so for 3 months. And that's not league mandated. That's just us. That's just officials doing that. Yeah, it's usually by that time.
If someone is interested in getting involved with officiating, maybe making it to the CFL, what is the best advice you can give them?
I would say you first start off, call your local association. So wherever you live, then if they have football, there's a local association and get involved there. So I started with the Saskatoon Football Officials Association. You become a member of that. There are 4 levels of amateur officiating to take. So you take your level 1 to become an official level 1 clinic, level 2, and then you might get asked you'd be asked if you want to do level 3 and 4. Like some officials don't make it past level 2. Maybe they're just not at that level. And so if the local association or the local panel for the PFC, for what we have here, or youth sport, if they feel that you're maybe a prospect, they'll say you should take your level 3 and see how you do. And if not, then some don't. But yeah, get involved and see if it's for you, because it's the hardest officiating is at the amateur level. I found if you can make it, I tell officials, you can make it on the sideline at U Sport and PFC, and if you can be a good official, and if you can, and even high school, it was harder to do those games, I found, with all the different things going on, than it was in the CFL. It's a great preparation. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of scrutiny. And there's a lot of, I find, and sometimes the coaches and the fans are worse at the amateur level than they are at the pro level to officials.
Ouch.
Yes. And that there's a problem because we lose officials because they're like, I'm doing this for like whatever, like bucks a game. And like, I'm out. And I think we lose a lot of hockey officials because of that. There's never a glut of officials anywhere. So we never have enough. I remember the constant complaining and just like, that's enough. Like at the amateur level, it's worse.
Mm.
It is. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. But that being said, I ask a lot of players, current players that are kind of at the end of their career, said, hey, when you're done this, we need officials. And every one of them said, yeah, right. None of them even entertained the thought. It'd be like, are you kidding me? There's no chance I would do this. Luckily, we did get Ben Chapelain, former Heck Crichton winner, is one of our up and coming officials, and he's excellent. He's really good. I really liked working with him. I worked with him a couple times this year, and it'd be great to have more former players. It'd be awesome, but I don't know. We tried, and I know other officials are like me, and they ask, hey, how'd you like to do this? And yeah, they just never had a taker. We had Rolly Lumbala in our program for a little bit, and then he got a job as a police officer, or as an RCMP. I'm not sure what happened, or which he got a job with, and then he hasn't been back. It'd be nice. It'd be good to have former players. I think it lends a lot of credibility. So we'll see. We'll keep working at it and see what happens.
Tim Kroeker, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
You're very welcome. I appreciate you having me.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble Podcast. Audio worth watching.